One of the most unique and influential Sith in the entire galactic history. In all records, the echo of the name Exar Kun reverberated off of every star for thousands of years. In all of Star Wars lore, you will be hard-pressed to find a Sith Lord more accomplished than Exar Kun, up there with the greats such as Revan, Nihilus, Bane, and Sidious. The Dark Lord Exar Kun took his age by storm, and truly brought the Republic to its knees. Starting out as a Jedi Knight, and corrupted by the spirit of Freed and Nad, Exar would grow to exceptional levels of power after accessing some of the darkest Sith secrets, such as their ways of sorcery and alchemy. Exar Kun was able to freeze an entire hall full of people with just a thought. The destroyer of the Jedi homeworld of Ossus, the inventor of the double-bladed lightsaber, and even the murderer of the Supreme Chancellor of the Republic. Exar Kun threw both the Republic and the Jedi Order into absolute chaos. If it were not for the betrayal of his apprentice, Ulic Qel-Droma, Exar Kun likely would have been successful in his mission to bring the eternal Sith rule to the galaxy, nearly single-handedly. Welcome, students of the Force, back to today's video, an opening of another holocron. Our archaeologists today have uncovered something significant, as we will be taking an in-depth analysis focused on the exact reason for Exar Kun's immense power. Or more specifically, something that we have not mentioned yet. His skill with the blade. Believe it or not, this was most definitely what he was mainly remembered for. It isn't even recorded if he ever did lose a duel, as he managed to defeat even the most renowned Jedi duelists of his era, and an argument could be made as to whether or not he may have even outclassed Dooku, Windu, Yoda, Sidious, and Vader. What we're trying to get at is Exar Kun may just be the best lightsaber duelist in all of Star Wars lore. But before we get on with the video, we post Star Wars content daily and are always looking for new content to bring to you. So if you're enjoying what you see, be sure to let us know what else you want us to take a look at, and be sure to force crush that subscribe button. Now, let us begin. One thing that is very often overlooked when talking about Exar Kun is how he was as a Jedi. What we mean is, he hated the Sith and wanted to do everything he could to wipe them all out of space and time, no matter what. For most Jedi, the distaste of Sith would cause them to venture more closely to the light side of the Force, and focused on becoming very much their opposite as possible. But this was not the case for the young Exar Kun. He despised the Sith so much, in fact, that he drilled himself as hard as possible to become the finest Jedi warrior, and he desired to know more about the dark side than any other Jedi, and perhaps even many Sith. He did this so that he could better prepare against any Sith threat. Taking a more know thy enemy approach, Exar Kun was convinced that if he were just given the opportunity to study the dark side directly, he could learn to understand it in a way where he could use it against his enemies and any future dark side opponents. However, he ran into a problem. His master, the renowned Vodo Siask boss, saw the greater dangers in the prospects of this young Jedi, as he knew how proud Exar Kun was. Arrogant and full of hubris had he become once he rose up to being of the top of his class in both the mastery of the Force, but more importantly, saber skill. Master Boss refused Kun's curiosity, but the young Jedi was not deterred and simply went behind his master's back to enjoy the knowledge within the holocrons of his collection. Although he was caught and scolded many times, Exar Kun remained staunch in his belief that he was powerful enough to handle the dark side knowledge left within, and furthermore, that he should not be kept a Padawan and should be knighted sooner than is common. This story sounds pretty familiar. Later on in Kun's training against the other Padawans, Kun bested them both, but got far too heated in his duel and struck down the other apprentice, nearly killing him, before his master Boss stopped him and disarmed the young Jedi. Weary of Kun's arrogance, Boss challenged the Padawan, wielding only his wooden staff. Exar Kun accepted the challenge and dueled his master. Vodo Boss still was more experienced, but found Exar Kun's balance point and disrupted it, sending him flying backwards. While Kun was on the ground, he summoned another lightsaber lying nearby and assumed a Jar Kai stance and began a flurry of blows against the older Jedi Master, using two blades. In a few short trades, he defeated the Master, breaking his stick. Vodo Boss would then concede that Exar Kun was the most formidable student that he had ever trained. Feeling that he had learned all he could from the Jedi, Exar Kun set out on his own to find the tomb of Freedin Nad. Freedin Nad, the name he had heard from the holocrons, and from here, his fate was sealed as he went down a dark path from which he would never return the same. So, what did make Exar Kun so strong with the lightsaber? We know that his power in the Force comes from his learning of ancient Sith secrets, as well as his training with Freedin Nad. But why does it seem as though no Jedi, even the most skilled of their order, could ever defeat him in melee combat? Curiously, Exar Kun was a master practitioner of Form 6, Nyman. This form is not very often talked about in Star Wars lore, and largely overlooked in most Star Wars media, which is an unfortunate tragedy because of how subtly effective it is. Form 6 could technically be called the true Jedi's form, as it perfectly symbolized just about everything that the Jedi stood for, though Nyman would typically be known as the diplomat's form because it was mainly used by Jedi consulars who did not often bring themselves to handle their lightsabers. Form 6 was a smooth combination of the previous 5 forms into a system that allowed for the perfect and seamless balance of the most simplistic offense and defense. Something else intriguing about Nyman is it's typically considered one of the lesser forms. Because of this though, and the melting of styles, Nyman was a humble form which did not boast any real strengths nor any clear advantages, but also did not relinquish any real weaknesses either. Ironically, the greatest weakness of the form was its lack of strengths, and its greatest strength was its lack of substantial weaknesses. The form emphasized force-based attacks more regularly than most lightsaber forms, and again was meant to rely only and used by those who required their saber as a last resort, hence why it was nicknamed the diplomat's form. It is quite interesting then, to say the least, why the most formidable duelist in galactic history used and employed Nyman. So why is this? Exar Kun wouldn't be the last great duelist to use Nyman, however, as the Jedi Battlemaster of the Clone Wars era, Sindralig, also mastered the form. Sindralig said that Nyman is the most practical form for the modern Jedi, and because of its jack-of-all-trades nature, it could take a practitioner at least 10 years to fully master it. Many Jedi, though, wrote off Nyman due to its perceived lack of luster nature, though it was very powerful in the hands of someone who truly knew its uses, and Nyman happened to be also a very friendly use of 2 sabers, creating its variant in Jar Kai. Many of those who used Jar Kai usually took inspirations from Nyman, as many Jedi found its basic and fluid nature more agreeable to the use of 2 blades. Form 6 was not nearly as demanding as many of the other forms, but still, it was written off as many Jedi thought it put you at a disadvantage against an expert in any given form, and a form more suited for dueling, such as Makashi Form 2. However, both Sindralig and Exar Kun put these notions to absolute shame. The hidden strength of Form 6 was its striking versatility. Because it employed the aspects of the many forms before it, Nyman could be molded and suited for literally almost any situation a Jedi could find themselves in. However, rather than adhere to its philosophy of moderation over aggression, Exar Kun deviated, and it is in this deviation where he found his success. Kun was a vicious duelist who favored brutal power moves and had little compunction against lashing out against his foes with physical attacks. These tendencies were exacerbated by his turn to the dark side of the Force, when he actively took to drawing on his rage in the heat of a duel. However, while Exar Kun failed to observe the core concepts of Form 6, essentially speeding up and perfecting Form 6, he was never defeated in a lightsaber duel. He took the versatility of Form 6 and then supercharged it. In all of the lore, only his fellow Darksider, Ulic Qel-Droma, was able to match him on neutral ground. Eventually, Exar Kun did have a rematch with his former master, Vodo Sias Bast, as he was leaving Coruscant, having freshly murdered the Chancellor. The two engaged in a fierce duel in which neither seemed to be able to best the other. This was when Exar Kun unveiled his crowning achievement that would change the way lightsaber combat would be used for centuries moving forward: the double-bladed lightsaber. Even though he was more used to a single blade, Exar Kun learned from his own master's use of the wooden stick and added a second blade to the bottom of his saber. However, there was something unique about Exar Kun's lightsaber, making it the most feared in all of Star Wars. I want to point out that I purposefully used the term double-bladed lightsaber in reference to Exar Kun's weapon, and do not call it a saber staff, as a saber staff is different on the grounds as they have a much larger hilt to give the wielder more control, like Darth Maul's, whilst a double-bladed lightsaber's hilt is the same length as a regular lightsaber. Exar Kun had chosen to go go this route as he was more accustomed with the single-bladed hilt, and felt that a longer hilt would prove as a disadvantage. The Sith Lord did end up besting his former master, and butchered him like all of the rest. The point about Exar Kun that makes him so dangerous though, and why he was never defeated, is his lightsaber form had an advantage that no other form has. That being, it is perfect against any opponent in any combat scenario. Nyman is so versatile that it can adapt to any enemy, and the aspects of Nyman that it originally lacked, Exar Kun built upon, creating power-based strikes. It also allowed him to seamlessly implement physical attacks as well as force abilities in the heat of a duel. Many of the greatest individuals and greatest lightsaber duelists that we know of in Star Wars lore have been defeated. You have individuals like Count Dooku, who was defeated by Anakin Skywalker in a blade-to-blade competition. Darth Sidious, who was forced to put his lightsaber away against Grandmaster Yoda. Anakin Skywalker, who was defeated by Obi-Wan Kenobi. And yet, Exar Kun remained undefeated in lightsaber combat, despite in an era where there were literally thousands of Jedi, and only him as a true Dark Lord. Another compelling thing about Nyman is that Darth Sidious too used this form, however, used it in conjunction with another lightsaber form. But if you would like a full breakdown on Darth Sidious's style, be sure to like the video. In finality, Exar Kun is one of the greatest lightsaber duelists to have ever existed within Star Wars lore, and in our analysis, has a legitimate case as the best lightsaber duelist in all of the lore. So my friends, does this answer your question about Exar Kun's skill? If you have anything to add, be sure to leave a comment down below, and make sure to let us know what other videos you would like to see. And as always, students of the Force, I hope that you have a phenomenal day.